She smiled while women screamed. She laughed while prisoners begged at her feet. And when they finally put her on trial, she sat there like she had done absolutely nothing wrong. This is Dorothea Binz. And by the end of this video, you will never forget her name. Most people picture men when they think of Nazi war criminals, generals, officers, men behind desks giving cold orders. But some of the most disturbing atrocities inside Nazi camps were carried out by women. Dorothea Binz wasn't just any woman in the system. She was the most feared female guard in the entire history of the Third Reich. She didn't stumble into this. She didn't get forced. She chose it and she thrived. But here's what haunts historians even today. Before she became a monster, she was just a 19-year-old girl from a small German town. Ordinary family, ordinary life. Nothing about her screamed danger. So what broke her? Or was she never whole to begin with? If you're new here, welcome to Nazi Dark History. This channel exists so we never forget. Hit subscribe. Now let's go. Born in 1920 in Dusterleben, Germany, Binz grew up during one of the most politically explosive moments in modern history. Post-WWI Germany was humiliated, economically crushed, and into that wound, Hitler poured his vision of a restored empire. Young people absorbed it like oxygen. In 1939, at just 19, Dorothea Binz volunteered to become a guard at Ravensbrück concentration camp. Not drafted, not ordered. She raised her hand, and that one decision destroyed thousands of lives. Ravensbrück, if you've never heard that name, that's the problem. Located 50 miles north of Berlin, it was the Nazi Reich's primary concentration camp built specifically for women. Over 130,000 women passed through its gates. Jewish, Polish, Soviet, Roma, resistance fighters, women who simply whispered the wrong thing. The conditions were engineered to destroy human beings. Starvation, forced labor, roll calls in freezing snow for hours just to watch women collapse. And standing over all of it were the female guards. None more feared than Dorothea Binz. When Binz arrived, she seemed unremarkable, young, inexperienced. But she watched, she learned. She understood fast cruelty inside Ravensbrück wasn't just permitted, it was rewarded. And she had something the system recognized immediately: a willingness to go further than anyone else. Within months, she built a reputation that made even other guards uncomfortable. She patrolled with a trained German shepherd. She invented punishments. Survivors recalled her arriving at roll call, sometimes humming, and within minutes, someone would be on the ground, not because of any infraction, sometimes for nothing at all. But random cruelty was only the surface. What Binz was actually involved in, the organized, systematic horror discovered when the Allies finally arrived, was something else entirely. Part 2 is where it gets much, much darker. There was a place inside Ravensbrück that prisoners called simply the bunker. Officially, it was the punishment block, a row of isolation cells where guards sent women who misbehaved. But under Dorothea Binz, the bunker became something else entirely. Survivors described being dragged there for infractions so minor they were almost invisible, speaking too loudly, moving too slowly, making eye contact with the wrong person. Once inside, women were beaten, starved, left in complete darkness for days. And Binz didn't just oversee this. She participated directly, personally, with her own hands. One survivor testified that Binz beat a prisoner so severely for dropping a bowl during mealtime that the woman couldn't stand for a week. A bowl, that's all it took. But here's where Ravensbrück's history becomes almost unbearable to read. Starting in 1942, Nazi doctors began conducting medical experiments on prisoners inside the camp. They called them surgical experiments. History calls them what they actually were: torture with a clipboard. Healthy women were taken without warning. Their legs were cut open. Bacteria, glass, and wood shavings were inserted into the wounds to study infection. Some women died on the tables. Others survived with permanent disabilities. Many were executed afterward so they couldn't testify. And Dorothea Binz, by this point rising toward the top of the female guard hierarchy, was part of the infrastructure that made all of this possible. She didn't perform the surgeries, but she delivered the women. She maintained the order. She ensured the system ran smoothly, which, in the eyes of international law, makes her just as guilty. Remember Edmund Breuning, the SS officer Binz fell in love with. Their relationship continued through all of this. Walks together, quiet evenings, a love story playing out 50 feet from barracks full of dying women. Survivors who witnessed both sides of Binz, the affectionate girlfriend and the brutal overseer, described something deeply psychologically disturbing. She wasn't suppressing her emotions at work. She wasn't going home and breaking down in guilt. She kept both worlds completely separate, comfortably, naturally. That, say psychologists who have studied Nazi perpetrators, is one of the most chilling signs of a truly dangerous human being. By 1944, Germany was losing the war. Everyone inside Ravensbrück knew it. And that's when something terrifying happened. Instead of slowing down, the killings accelerated. A gas chamber was constructed at Ravensbrück in late 1944. In the final months of the war, thousands of women were systematically murdered there, as the SS attempted to eliminate witnesses. Dorothea Binz was present through all of it. When Soviet forces finally approached in April 1945, SS guards began destroying evidence, burning documents, forcing surviving prisoners on death marches. Binz fled with the retreating SS, but she didn't get far. British forces captured Dorothea Binz in 1945. When they found her, she was 24 years old. 24, and already responsible for more suffering than most people could comprehend in a lifetime. At her arrest, witnesses described her as calm, almost unbothered, like someone pulled over for a minor traffic violation, not a woman facing accusations of systematic torture and murder. That composure would follow her all the way into the courtroom. And what happened there, what she said, how she acted, and what the judges ultimately decided, that's where this story reaches its brutal, unforgettable end. Because the trial of Dorothea Binz wasn't just a legal proceeding, it became one of the most emotionally devastating moments in post-war justice. Survivors took that stand and looked her directly in the eyes. And what Binz did in response will stay with you. Hamburg, Germany, 1946. The Ravensbrück trials began, and the world finally got to see Dorothea Binz sitting not behind a whip, but behind a defendant's table. The courtroom was heavy with silence when the first survivor walked to the stand. These were women who had survived starvation, beatings, and medical experiments. Women who had watched friends die on frozen roll call grounds. Women who had spent years trying to forget the face of the person who haunted their nightmares. And now that face was sitting 10 feet away from them. Survivor after survivor testified, each account more devastating than the last, each memory more specific, more detailed, more impossible to dismiss. They remembered her laugh, they remembered her dog, they remembered her humming, and Dorothea Binz sat there, composed, straight back, like none of it touched her. But then came the moment that survivors later said they would never forget. When Binz was given the opportunity to speak, to respond to the testimonies, she didn't break down. She didn't apologize. She didn't show a single flicker of remorse. She said she was following orders, that she was doing her job, that she didn't believe she had done anything that warranted this level of punishment. The courtroom went completely silent. One survivor, sitting in the gallery, later wrote in her memoir that hearing those words hurt more than anything Binz had ever physically done to her. Because it meant none of it, not one moment of suffering, had ever registered as wrong inside Dorothea Binz's mind. The judges didn't deliberate long. Dorothea Binz was found guilty of war crimes. The sentence, death by hanging. She was 25 years old. And here is the detail that historians note quietly, because it carries enormous weight. She was one of only a small number of women in post-war Europe to be sentenced to death by a military tribunal. The evidence against her was so overwhelming, so well documented through survivor testimony, that the court had no room for leniency. Justice, for once, was not looking away. Hameln Prison, Germany, early morning. Dorothea Binz walked to the gallows alongside several other convicted Ravensbrück guards and SS personnel. Witnesses present described her as pale but controlled. She did not scream. She did not beg. In a dark, almost incomprehensible way, she faced her death with the same cold composure she had carried through the entire trial. At 5:00 a.m., Dorothea Binz was executed. She was 26 years old, the same age as some of the women she had beaten simply for existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. Here is the truth that this story forces us to confront. Dorothea Binz was not born evil. No one is. She was a product of a system that selected for cruelty, rewarded brutality, and stripped away every social and moral barrier that normally stops human beings from harming each other. She made choices every single day. She chose to raise her hand and volunteer. She chose to go further than required. She chose to find satisfaction in suffering. That is not an excuse. That is a warning. Because systems like Ravensbrück don't appear from nowhere. They are built slowly, quietly, inside societies where people stop paying attention, where cruelty gets normalized one small step at a time, where ordinary 19-year-olds decide that some human beings simply don't deserve dignity. 130,000 women passed through Ravensbrück. Tens of thousands never came home. Their names are harder to find than the names of their persecutors. Their faces are harder to see. Their stories are buried under decades of silence and discomfort. This channel exists to change that. If this video made you feel something, if it taught you something you didn't know, share it. Because the most powerful thing we can do for people who suffered in silence is make sure the world remembers they existed. Subscribe if you haven't already. And we'll see you in the next dark chapter of history.